did actually come first, like your Buddhist practice or your MBSR training, and did they influence each other?
Yeah, well, so the MBSR actually was quite late in my exploration of meditation. So I started with an interest in meditation in my teens, and I took up meditation then, and got a lot from it, enjoyed it, and gradually sort of moved more towards my interest in the Buddhist take on meditation. And then, I was very interested in meditation. In fact, I spent a few years even living in a meditation retreat centre, Vajraloka, in North Wales, back in the 80s. And so I very much appreciated meditation and enjoyed it, and I've been very interested in teaching it over the years. And I've been teaching it here in Cambridge, to the general public, as well as kind of more kind of Buddhist oriented courses as well. And I suppose what happened with MBSR was a friend of mine, Michael Chaskelson, was on his training at Bangor University, and he wanted to teach a course here. And I was the chair of the Buddhist Centre at the time. And normally we wouldn't have people from outside doing things in the Buddhist Centre. So to check it out and to see if the course was appropriate for the Buddhist Centre, I sat in on it.
Okay.
And this was in 2004. So by then I'd already been teaching for like 25 years or so. And I'd read Kabat-Zinn's book. So Kabat-Zinn, the developer of MBSR, I'd read his book in the 90s when it first came out. It's called Full Catastrophe Living. And kind of thought, it looks kind of interesting, but I didn't get how transformative it could be till I actually did a course myself. And that course here in 2004 just revealed to me how transformative it could be. And one of the things I particularly liked about it is that it wasn't just delivering a formula to people, but it was based in inquiry. It was based in asking people, what's your experience of this, and what are you finding, and what's it like for you? So it very much was sort of co-evolved with the participants, and I found that a very effective and interesting process, because it means it's always different depending on who's in the room, and it also gives it a very live kind of quality. So that's what got my interest in it, and then it was a bit after that I co-led a couple of courses then with Michael and with John Teasdale, and then I became interested in doing the training myself at Bangor University, and I did my master's there in mindfulness-based approaches to health and well-being. That was the sort of framing of it. I find it a very effective course for people. Participants often really do, even though it's only an 8-week course, they often really have these quite profound shifts in their awareness and way of being in the world, and very much happier, very much less stressed and so on by the end. So that's why I've continued to sort of teach both dimensions, the secular, non-religious kind of mindfulness, but also the Buddhist stuff. And in fact, that's my sort of main work these days, is doing the Buddhist background to mindfulness.
It's interesting that they do that. I think it's important, because I think that there's been maybe sometimes there's been a tendency to really try and separate Buddhism, like the context of mindfulness, basically. Not always, but I think sometimes there has been. So it's great that you're involved with that. So
what Kabat-Zinn would say there is that, because he's been accused of decontextualizing mindfulness, and I think there's something in that criticism, but he would say it's not so much decontextualizing it, i.e. taking mindfulness as one element of the Buddhist path out of its traditional context, which involves lots of other practices, but it's more recontextualizing it for the West. So that's an interesting distinction, between it being decontextualized or being recontextualized. The way I tend to think of it is that the influences on the 8-week program are kind of coming from Western influences like science and psychology and research and all that sort of thing. But then you've also got the traditional, what are sometimes called contemplative traditions, especially the Buddhist one. But each of those influences is more like a map. And the territory that we're interested in is the territory of people's actual experience.
Yeah.
So in some ways the maps are very helpful because they can guide us and orient us. But ultimately it's the territory that matters. And that's what I like about this sort of MBSR and mindfulness-based programs in general, is that they are oriented very directly to people's immediate experience, rather than sometimes, I would say, traditional approaches kind of foreground their particular map or their particular take, and it's not necessarily that relevant.
Yeah.
So by doing something more sort of based in exploration with the participants, it tends to be more appropriate and transformative. And it also, by the way, is what keeps my interest going over the years. You know, I've been doing it for many years now. In fact, I've led the MBSR course here, the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction course here. Well, I've been doing it now since 2004, so that's over 20 years now, and must have done it over 100 times. But actually, it's fresh and interesting every time because it's exploratory.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So it's like you say, it's different based on who's on the course and what experiences they're having. And
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I suppose which came first? Well, definitely the Buddhist stuff came first because I did a lot of Buddhist meditation prior to coming across the secular mindfulness. But I like the MBSR approach because it is invitational. It's kind of more open to people. They don't need to be a Buddhist or even have an interest in that to do the course. And it's more directly addressing their issues. So if they're stressed or anxious or experiencing low mood or in physical pain, then this course can be helpful for them. You know, and while the Buddhist understandings are kind of there in the background informing it, they're not. It's not necessary for participants to kind of have an explicit knowledge of them. Because really what they need is a helpful map for navigating their own experience, which I think the course offers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. It does tie in a little bit to, I was going to ask something about, obviously it is secular and like you say, it's more exploratory. And also has there ever been like a time where people are doing the course and they're doing it for a particular reason, but then something else unfolds as part of that, and maybe they have blissful meditation experiences or something, and they start having questions about I don't know, how has that ever happened, and how have you responded to that in the past? I don't know.
Yeah, certainly sometimes people are surprised by what shows up. Sometimes very pleasantly surprised. And can gain a different perspective on their life or even their intentions. So they might start off with a particular kind of intention, and then in doing the course they revise their understanding of what it is they're trying to do, and might even start changing some of like their habits in life. Like just the mindfulness might encourage them to change what they eat because they realise, when I pay attention to what I'm eating, I realise it isn't very pleasant. And if they're eating with awareness, then they might change their diet. But then also some of what they prioritise in their life might change. And one example would be someone who was speaking of the course as a sort of way to be more successful in life, and then realised that she already had all the things she needed. She had her own house, she had financial security and all that. And she didn't need to keep on just working harder and harder. So it almost became a bit more, well, what's life all about anyway? And one of the outcomes of mindfulness practice is sometimes what's called values clarification, which is that people realise, I thought this is what was important to me, and now I realise it's this other thing. So that does happen on courses, where people realise what matters to them more, and reprioritise things. But yeah, maybe you could just let me know a little bit about yourself and your interest in this topic. Yeah.
Yeah. So my interest, gosh. Yeah. So I've been meditating for probably about 20 years, which is crazy, seeing as you think, oh, how old are you? But yeah, no, I started meditating quite young. I think I was about 8 or something, 8 or 9, with my elder brother. And then, yeah, it wasn't necessarily like Buddhist meditations to start with, but I think I had some quite strong experiences quite early on. So, and I was already quite a inquisitive child, so I would just ask lots of questions. And actually, I was the only one in my family who was interested in religion as well from a young age. I was Christian, and then I kind of I lost faith in that, and I was like, oh, there's got to be something, some answers somewhere. And then I started researching different religions, and I came across Buddhism, and I read about the 3 lakshanas, and basically was just like, oh, I'm a Buddhist. So it was like, oh, I just knew, and it felt, lots of people say this, but it felt like I wasn't reading it for the first time. So that's, I guess, where my interest in like meditation in general stemmed from, and then I started to learn the mindfulness of breathing, and then a couple of years after that I started to learn the metta bhavana. So I've been meditating for a while, and then I was just really interested in like people really, and in human behaviour. So I knew that I wanted to do psychology. I did psychology in Leeds as my undergrad, and then after that I decided I wanted to be a therapist. So I went and did a master's, and actually I didn't just want to do any sort of therapy. I knew I wanted to incorporate mindfulness into that.
Okay.
And I'd learned a bit about positive psychology, and I was quite interested in it. So it turns out like the only 2 universities were Anglia Ruskin and Bolton. So I went to Bolton because I could get a counselling degree alongside the positive psychology.
Okay. So
I'm qualified to do positive psychotherapy. So it's just been, so I guess it's like, Buddhism came first for me, and then my interest in maybe like how I could use what I've learned from Buddhist practice to help other people, maybe similar to some of the things you said, like it's less alienating for people sometimes if they're not religious or they don't want to have a label attached to it.
Right.
That's kind of what I wanted as well. I wanted to be able to just use those tools to help people. Without that, I guess.
Great. Well, maybe just to say, there are parallels there for me as well. I started meditating quite young, in my teens, as it happens, and I gradually gravitated more towards the Buddhist style of meditating and understanding. And I did some travelling in Asia, and that kind of got me more interested in the Buddhist stuff. And I eventually, even was ordained into what was then called the Western Buddhist Order. And I've been very interested in the meditative aspect of things, really pretty much all my adult life. And that included living in this meditation centre for a few years, and then also doing a lot of teaching, sometimes of the Buddhist stuff, but also just of meditation as an introduction to the general public, but using Buddhist meditations. And then it was really just after about 25 years of that I came across the secular, the non-religious style, as developed by Kabat-Zinn in the University of Massachusetts Medical Center in the States. And he was developing it in a hospital setting to help people with pain and anxiety and that sort of thing. And I just found his approach very good. And when I first tried it, I was impressed by how transformative, even though it's only an 8-week program, just how much people learnt about themselves and discovered and changed their way of being, actually, their mode of mind. You know, so very often people come in and they're kind of quite concerned to get an outcome straight away, and there's a big emphasis on letting your experience be as it is and being non-judgmental, while also just really paying attention to what's actually happening. And often people find that a very interesting exploration. And by the end of the 8 weeks, there's a quite noticeable shift in how people are being. You know, by the end, less judgmental, kinder, more self-aware, feeling freer and happier than they were at the start. And that's what, in a way, what the 8-week program is for. It's to support people in that journey, if you like. And I find that the idea of modes of mind quite a helpful way of thinking of it, because it's not about what do people think or believe, really, so much as about how do they think and how are they in the world. And one of the big transitions in the 8-week course is from what we call a driven doing mode of mind, you know, very goal-oriented, often conceptually driven, you know, trying to sort of find answers at a conceptual level. And the course is more like a skills training that helps people make a transition from that driven doing mode of mind into what we call a being or a mindful mode of mind.
Yeah.
And it's more spacious, it's more self-aware, it's more kind of relational, better connections with other people, that sort of thing. But it's a training, if you like, in changing habits, habits of attention in particular. So, you know, Kabat-Zinn, the developer of mindfulness-based stress reduction, describes mindfulness as being the awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. And that's a sort of operational definition that we use in the course quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's what the practices consist in, is paying attention in this kind of non-judgmental way to whatever shows up in your experience. But usually we have a focus of the attention, if you like, which would be something like immediate experience, like breath awareness or body awareness or maybe sensory awareness. But as we're paying attention to those things, our sort of patterns of mind also show up and our way of being, and gradually become more aware of that and manage to effect a change in our mode of being, which is more conducive to well-being and less to, you know, creating further stress and anxiety by the way we respond to things. Or again, the distinction we would sometimes make is between reacting and responding. And the program doesn't really aim to so much change the content of people's lives as more the way they're relating to it. So even if there's a stressor, well, that's natural, that's part of life. But what we sometimes don't realize is our habits of mind contribute to that stress. And our way of what I call reacting now to the primary stresses. So, you know, you stub your toe, it hurts and it's stressful, but then it's very easy to go into judging and criticizing yourself, and that adds more stress. So what the mindfulness helps people to do is to become aware of those patterns of self-criticism, self-judgment, and be kinder. And by changing their relationship to their experience, it becomes less problematic, and they have happier, more fulfilling kind of experience of things. Which is not to say that it might not be difficult at times, but there's a better relationship with it. So that was a lot. I don't know if I was speaking too fast, but you know.
Sounds interesting, yeah. It's actually quite hard to not to then be like, oh yeah, and label it with what we, you know, the Buddhist term like second arrow or something.
Yes,
like,
that's right. Well, we can do that. We can say, well, yeah, so sometimes in the Buddhist metaphor that's used is like stress is like an arrow that hits you and it's painful, but then sometimes you get a second arrow, which is a self-inflicted one, which the nature of it is of the second arrow is that we're criticizing or judging ourselves or ruminating on, well, what's the cause for this first arrow? And actually that just digs us deeper into the problem.
Yeah.
And the mindfulness helps us to withdraw certainly the second arrow of self-judgment and self-criticism and the secondary stress that we add to the primary stressors. But it doesn't necessarily stop the primary stresses from happening. Although as soon as one is in a less stressed way, one is likely to make better and wiser choices anyway, which are likely to lead to less stress in that regard as well, just by being a bit more aware.
I wonder whether it's worth going through briefly, like what the course entails, like in terms of like I don't know, like what's involved in it, because I've not done an MBSR course,
right.
So I don't know. Is it just kind of like, you know, mainly like meditative things, or is it? I read something about it there being specific yoga poses and things involved, or something. I don't know. Okay,
so well, first of all, the big overview is that it's usually if we talk about mindfulness-based programs, they're defined in a particular way, and they usually involve 8-week programs. So it would be 8 sessions of 2.5 hours, sometimes preceded with an introductory session, sometimes with a practice day part of the way through, where, you know, as well as the weekly sessions, there might be a session at a weekend for a bit longer. And so we refer to them sometimes as 8-week programs, although they can vary a little bit also. Certainly the one we do here is an 8-week program, usually with an introductory session beforehand. And in those, each session then is about 2.5 hours long, and it's a mixture of mindfulness practices, which I'll say a bit more about what mindfulness is in a bit. So it's a mixture of mindfulness practices, then sort of investigation of what our experience is of doing those practices. And then some of those practices would be like sitting down meditation, just sitting in an ordinary chair, like not necessarily in any special posture or anything like that. And paying attention maybe to body sensations or breath awareness or something, guided, you know, by whoever the instructor is. And then the other practices might be something like mindful movement, which is just bringing awareness to the body in movement. And so there are different elements of little formal practices, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. The formal practices would be where you put time aside to do the mindfulness. And then the informal practices would be where you're just encouraged to bring awareness to whatever you're already doing in your day. So you might be just washing the dishes or brushing your teeth or something, and you just, for a couple of minutes, you just practice really being with that experience rather than letting yourself go off into thinking about the past or the future or that sort of thing. So the course then consists in learning these formal and informal practices and seeing what emerges through doing that. And one of the key things that emerges, I think, is people learn to recognize their patterns of mind and behavior that lead to further stress. And the awareness that arises through doing the practices of paying attention, you know, non-judgmentally and so on, help to bring that possibility of choice, you know, what we say, learning to respond to things rather than to react. Okay. So no yoga poses. No, in fact, it's when we introduce it, we do the mindful movement, and it does draw a little bit on Tai Chi and yoga and things, but very much encourage people not to treat it as Tai Chi or yoga, but really just as an exploration of the body and movement. Okay. So if they already have a yoga practice, we say, well, this isn't yoga. This is us exploring, you know, our relationship with our experience as we move the body. And sometimes that might mean like noticing little aches and pains and things like that, and then it's like, oh, well, now what happens when there's an ache or a pain? You know, I start having aversion. It's like, oh, I don't want that. And, oh, my poor me, I'm falling apart, and all that kind of thing. and it's quite different, you know, cultivating awareness through activity than just sitting still. So the course involves a bit of both.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, I imagine as well it's good to not label the movement with, like you say, yoga, tai chi or anything, because if people do already practice, then they might have their own views and judgments about how that's
exactly. Yeah. One of the other practices that is quite significant in the program we do is little short practices. They're only like a few minutes long, and the idea is that we can step out of our automatic pilot reactions to things and practice just being more aware of the body, more aware of the feelings, the thoughts, emotions, impulses that are happening moment by moment, and on the basis of that then making wiser choices in terms of how we respond to things. So they're woven in increasingly as the course goes on, little what we call 3-step breathing spaces.
Oh yeah.
And then people are encouraged to do them throughout the day, so that the mindfulness is not just something that they do on the cushion, but is something that starts to inform the way they're being throughout the rest of their day. Yeah.
That's great. I wonder whether there's any, has there ever been a time where there's been people on your course that haven't had a good experience, or haven't got, I guess, I mean, like you say, people come maybe sometimes with like wanting a particular outcome, and that might change as they do the course, but some people might go away feeling like, oh, actually I've not addressed the issue that I came here for. I don't know.
Yeah. No, usually the feedback is very positive, and people often really find the course to be something of a revelation, and they're usually very happy to have done it. Occasionally, it's actually very rare, and this is really just going back to many years ago, somebody might do the course and they're not really quite ready for it. So we say the course is open to everybody, but it's recommended not to do it when you're in the middle of some major crisis, or let's say if you're currently experiencing like clinically diagnosed depression or something like that, then it's recommended to wait until you're recovered. And by the way, the mindfulness courses are even recommended, and there's been something called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for depression, which is an effective intervention for helping to prevent depressive relapse and recurrence. But the general intention is to do those courses when one is well. So I sometimes say, you know, the course is like planting seeds, and you don't really want to be planting seeds in the middle of a storm. So it's better to wait until the storm has passed and then plant the seeds. So similarly, it's better for people just to, you know, there's sometimes people say, you know, oh, well, there'll never be a better time. You know, life is always a bit kind of full on. But even so, I like to do an introductory session with people, and then to follow that up with a one-to-one interview just to check if it's an appropriate time to do the course. In the early days, we let 1 or 2 people in who probably it wasn't really very wise for them to do it, and they were just very self-critical because they were quite depressed. And now I just say to people, no, wait until you're a bit better. A bit of low mood obviously is fine and natural. We all have our ups and downs, but not to do the course if you're in the middle of like a full-on depressive episode.
Yeah.
So I think in that respect, the course tends to really land well for people. Sometimes I think people might find it a bit challenging to do all the practices and things, because they're already stressed, they've got full lives, and then we're inviting them to do sometimes up to an hour of extra things in their day, and that adds an extra pressure on. So it can be challenging, but as I say, usually the overall feedback is very positive. And I don't think anybody has a really terrible experience doing it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Good to know. I guess in a way it's similar then in to the positive psychology kind of approach of like being a bit more preventative, like you say, if you look at it as like planting seeds, it's almost like, oh, you know, ready for then when you are trying to then weather a storm in a way,
That's right.
like later on.
That's right.
Yeah.
So one of the encouragements on the course is to do these mindfulness practices regularly. And the analogy sometimes used says, don't wait until the plane is going to start weaving your parachute. Weave the parachute regularly, so that if some crisis emerges later, you're ready. So we might say that's like one has practiced inhabiting these modes of mind, which create a kind of resilience to later stressors, and helps one to respond to those rather than kind of get caught up in some sort of reaction. So it's not like the mindfulness is just something that you do once or twice and then that's it. It's better to think of it as a kind of a habit that one cultivates, and it's a kind of skill of paying attention in a particular way, and that helps one to respond then to future stressors. And by weaving the parachute regularly, then when a stressor shows up, one can respond a bit better.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and just I guess, yes, something slightly personal, but I had a diagnosis of depression. I guess I still have it, but it's been quite a few years now since I've had a depressive episode. And it's quite interesting because even though I have been meditating from a young age, it hasn't always been super consistent. And there were times, probably in like my late teens, early 20s, where I would only meditate when I was having a depressive episode. And I was just like, oh, why is it not working? Like, why isn't it helping? And then only since I've been more consistent, I've then thought, oh, I wonder if this is, I've then had things happen, stresses in life, where usually in the past I would have probably been triggered into a depressive episode and I haven't been.
Right.
And now I'm really seeing the payoff of being consistent and building that resilience.
Great.
So I definitely can attest to the,
So one of the ideas that underpins the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for depression is that you can practice it when you're not in a depressive episode. So it's not a remedial intervention when you're right in the middle of it and then let's try and get you out of there. It's rather that the patterns of mind that underpin a depressive mode of mind are activating in all of us all of the time, whether we suffer from depression or not. And the mindfulness can address that when we're well, and we learn more about how to respond before the crisis emerges, if you like. And then that skill of responding can still be with us when if things become challenging. So in a way, that's the beauty, if you like, of MBCT for depression, is that one can practice it when one is well. And then it becomes a resource to help to protect one from falling into, if you like, that mode of mind, which once it's emerged is quite hard to not just get entangled in. No, it's really interesting. I don't know if you've heard of mindfulness-based, I think it's strengths production or strengths. Oh, right.
I don't, but that's something that has been inspired by like MBSR and MBCT, those similar styles of courses, but it has, it's linked to positive psychology as well. And that's similar, it's like, I guess it's probably more similar to cognitive-based therapy. Because it is looking at like those cognitive patterns, I guess, but it's also looking at kind of preventing it by boosting people's character strengths using mindfulness as well, to then give them more kind of boost their self-esteem, boost their resilience, so that it prevents. I don't know if it was specifically designed to, address things like depression or whatever, but it's meant to, on the whole, help people's mental well-being to be kind of. Well,
I suppose it is prioritizing health and well-being, rather than some sort of remedial thing. And it's interesting, isn't it, that for you, there was a tendency to like treat mindfulness as something remedial that you do when you're not well, rather than something to do when you're well. And I'd say it's better to do it all the time, when you're well. And that's why it's probably better to think of it not just as a sort of a one-off intervention, but really more as like a lifestyle change. Yeah. And the 8-week course is really a chance just to practice and learn certain skills, which then are available for, for the rest of one's life, if you like. Not necessarily at the same level of intensity, The course itself does involve fairly intensive practice. And we ask people to commit to that for the 8 weeks. But after the 8 weeks, it's up to individuals how much they would like to do. But it's a little bit like taking up a fitness program at a gym or something, where you commit to a certain level of practice for a duration of the course. And then after that, you might not do the same level of exercise or whatever, but one has already established a certain baseline of health and of strength, and then you just keep some maintenance up beyond that. So I think the mindfulness is a bit like that. So it can be, it's challenging, like any change work often can be quite challenging. Like, going to the gym for 8 weeks, is quite a big commitment. And of course it takes quite a bit of time. And the question is, well, why would I want to put all that time and energy into something? And I suppose one of the things I would say is, well, actually there's quite a lot of research evidence now that it's worth doing in terms of developing greater well-being, and also in developing a greater responsiveness to stressors that might maybe tip one into stress or anxiety or low mood or whatever. Yeah.
I wonder whether you do you ever invite past participants of courses back, maybe, I don't know, a year after they've done it, just as a one-day thing, to see how if people have continued any of the practices?
Well, we do have sometimes practice days where people come back, and often, well, in fact, sometimes people repeat the course as well. Like on this last course we had some people who'd done it 15 years before and 10 years before. And in each case, they said that their initial course had a profoundly transformative effect, and they were back for another go, if you like. And it was quite different the second time, but equally valuable in a different way. I was very encouraged by that, actually, when people said, their first course had been really profoundly transformative. And again, I often hear that. People often say, oh yes, that course, even though it was only 8 weeks, really, I developed certain insights and ways of relating to things in those 8 weeks that have stayed with me for years. And then sometimes, people fall away from doing the practice because it can be quite hard to keep up a daily practice, but some of the insights stay with them. And I sometimes say it's also like, the gym analogy only works so far, because if you stop exercising, then you lose that fitness. But with the mindfulness work, it's not only that you develop a certain kind of responsiveness, but also you learn a way of being that's a bit like learning to ride a bike. Even if you don't ride a bike for years, when you take it up again, you know how to do it. And I think mindfulness is a bit like that. So sometimes people forget and they don't do the practice, or life just intervenes and they get too busy or something. And then they're always welcome to start again. And again, preferably in a non-judgmental way, just kind of go, oh, okay, now I'll do that thing that was useful. And if they've already had the training and done an 8-week course, they're more likely to find that quite easy to do, to take it up again. Although, again, it might be helpful to do the course a second time, just to re-establish the habit, as it were. Which is what some people have, when they came back to this course, they were finding it very helpful, very supportive to do the course again with a group of people. That's another thing I'd like to say, actually, is that we do get quite a lot of people who've tried mindfulness through apps. Because there's a lot of apps now, and there's a lot of stuff online, which some of it's really quite good. But it's very different, practicing from a book or from an app on the phone or whatever, to actually being in a room with other people. And again, often the atmosphere is very supportive and very welcoming, and people find it's much easier to be non-judgmental and exploratory with their experience when they're in a room full of other people, than if they're just doing it by themselves with an app.
Well, I imagine as well they can have discussions with people, like see what other people's experiences are, and
that's right.
And Yeah, I don't know. I can just imagine that there's something in having like a community of people that are all trying to do the same thing, or everyone's trying to like I don't know, explore something together. Yeah.
Well, that's often a surprise to people, just how valuable the experience of doing it with other people is. It's often, they often find it much easier, and it's kind of encouraging doing it with other people. Because when you realise it's not just my mind that wanders, but everybody's mind wanders, then it becomes less, there's something wrong with me that my mind is like this, and it just becomes, that's just common human experience.
Yeah.
And I can learn to be a bit less critical of that. And that's again often part of the insight. And when I say at the end of the course, when I ask people, well, what did you learn? They say, I'm a lot kinder now than I used to be. Not only in the practice, but even in their life generally. They've just become a bit more tolerant and kinder. There was something else I was going to say there, but yeah.
I guess it makes a difference as well, having somebody leading who they can ask questions to as well, somebody with experience who, I mean, if you're doing it on an app and you have questions and things, it's like, well, who do you ask? You probably end up Googling it, or like trying to find all the YouTube videos.
Well, I think people do find it helpful to be able to ask questions of people with relatively quite a bit of experience in meditation practice, but also actually people learn a lot from each other, and the program it isn't just me guiding things. It also involves sharing experience, only what people are comfortable to share in a group, but there's very much an encouragement to do that, to talk about their immediate experience. Again, it's probably worth saying, MBSR, it's not therapy, so it's not like a therapy context, it's more like a skills training. And the emphasis isn't on like some sort of archaeological dig into our past. It's much more like, well, what's my experience of actually practicing in this way? And so it's helpful to hear other people's experience and what are they noticing, or what are they discovering, or what are they finding easy, what are they finding difficult, and all that. So that's part of the program, as well as me guiding people through meditations. We then have a chance for people to share their experience of doing that, and also their experience of engaging with the home practice, or not engaging with the home practice, as the case might be. And what's that like? So the sharing and the learning from the group is really valuable. And again, part of my own appreciation of these courses is because it's all fresh, and inquiring into people's actual experience, and everybody's different, it tends to sort of bring up things that are sort of recognizable patterns that we all share, but also there's a kind of a newness to it that keeps it very interesting and engaging. So although I've been doing it now for over 20 years, I still find every course, really interesting. And I imagine I'll be doing them for the rest of my days, kind of thing, because it's just such an interesting journey. Which is different to, I think, some approaches to meditation teaching where there's a set formula, and you just do that, follow that formula. And I think one can do that maybe for a year or two, but then it's very easy to lose interest. But because this is always unfolding, it kind of stays. There's always a new horizon, if you like, to be exploring.
Yeah. Might be coming to a bit of a natural close. I think.
Do you want to check your questions there and just see have we kind of covered?
Yeah. I mean, the last question I had was a bit just of a, I don't know if you might have already said, but I put, if there's one thing you've learned in all these years of practicing and teaching mindfulness techniques, what would it be? It might be quite a hard question.
Well, it's an interesting question because the temptation is to try and sort of capture something very sort of multidimensional and multifaceted in a single statement. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't do that. So, actually life is much richer than any kind of ideas we might have about it. And I suppose rather than trying to sort of understand it just, with a sort of single insight, I think it's much more about having an attitude of exploration to this kind of, well, what's ultimately very mysterious, like life and what we're doing here and all that kind of thing. So I suppose one thing I've learned is that, that you can't capture it in one or two ideas, but I have also learned then how to be more exploratory and curious and interested. And if I've got one thing that I would hope would come out of like a short introduction to mindfulness, and I think of, by the way, even an 8-week course, I think of it as a short introduction to mindfulness, it's just that it will stimulate people's curiosity about being alive and the possibilities in living in a more wholesome, a more self-aware kind of way. Yeah, maybe that'll do.
Good answer.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Phoebe. It's interesting to hear a little bit about you as well, and I didn't know that you'd done positive psychology and all that, and that it kind of makes a bit more sense than what you're doing here. And I hope you're finding, working at the Buddhist Centre kind of is helping you to realise that direction, if you like, of something that is kind of wholesome for people and not too sort of oriented to issues and difficulties, even while responding to like the challenges in life and etc. I teach the Buddhist background, and a lot of that is about, the nature of stress and difficulty and how to respond to that. But it's also very much about, well-being and wholesomeness, and how to, as best we can, make real an intention to lead a full and satisfying life. Not only to deal with problems, but actually to even enjoy things and flourish.